just of realizing like, what does that mean to me? Like, why do I want that? Why is that so important to me? Like, why do I want this financial freedom so bad? And really it came down to, I want my time. And I realized I don't want a job. I don't want someone telling me what to do. I want to be able to do, whatever I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And the real estate, the investing, the financial freedom was how I was going to do that. And so, for me, I want to be able to go, like right before this podcast, me and my wife went and worked out, we get to hang out with the kids. We don't miss their events. And, that's important to me, to be able to jump on a podcast in the middle of the day.
Absolutely.
Like those are things. So the real estate allows me to do all these things in my life outside of my business that are important to me. But that took some time of really realizing, like, why do I want that? And so when I go into making any kind of decision, I think about, how does this affect these other areas of my life? And so as far as analyzing the deals themselves, early on, I knew nothing about cap rate. I didn't know, people were throwing around all these fancy analyzing terms. Early on, it was, and even to this day, it's about cash flow first. Cash flow first. So the way I looked at it with those first deals, when banks were giving me 100%, easy money, right? There's nothing to lose. It's cash flow positive, infinite return. Seller financing, same thing. No money down. If I was cash flow positive, that very first seller financing deal, when I'm looking at the numbers of those 4 units, the 2 duplexes, I'm looking at this going, this cash flow is, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And I think people tend to overcomplicate it, right? Like, here's the income coming in, here's the expenses. Now the expenses can change, but I saw the last 2 years of what the expenses have been. So I have a very good idea. I understand something could go wrong. It could cost more, or maybe something costs less because I, create some better systems or whatnot. But ultimately, if I was going in with no money, any cash flow, that's how I looked at it. Any cash flow was positive. And again, going back to all the what ifs that could happen, it still, didn't outweigh the risk of not doing the deal. So initially it was cash flow positive, no money down. Absolutely. Dinner table growing up, I had a great family. That was something that, my parents, family was definitely an important part. And having dinner together was an important part of our family growing up. And that's something that we've carried on. Me and my wife and our kids, sitting down and having dinner together most nights. So, conversation, my family was very, very open for the most part. Everything and anything was discussed, whether it seemed appropriate at the time or not. So that was kind of our dinner table. My dad was a very, very funny guy, and everyone kind of just spoke their minds.
Very cool. Very cool. And were you an entrepreneurial kid? Were you the kid, starting little things here and there, or?
For sure. I didn't grow up with a ton, right? Like, we had everything we needed. My parents definitely provided, but I was that kid that kind of thought, gosh, everybody else is wealthier. Everybody else has more money, which later I found out was not the case. A lot of these families were just in a bunch of debt and just lived like they were wealthy. So like at 12 years old, I went and got a paper out because it was the only job I could get at 12. I just wanted some level of financial freedom of my own. And so that was like my first job from like 12 to 16. And then, I sold candy bars out of my locker in 6th grade. I'd buy them across the street and finance that with my friend that actually got lunch money. I was like, hey, here's an idea. Sold condoms out of my locker in 9th grade, and school shut that down pretty quick. I was always looking for a way, like, hey, how can I make a little bit more, or come up with a creative way to make a few dollars. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So when did you get into real estate investing? Did you go to college? Was this after college? Talk a little bit about that.
I did not go to college. So, like high school for me really was social. That was my social environment. I started wrestling in high school, and that was a really big part of my high school years. And really kind of carried a lot of the things I learned in wrestling, kind of into my real estate investing journey. But really, like, school was not something I was super interested in. I wasn't. I definitely didn't pay attention in class. It was, when's class over? What's the next social gathering, so to speak. So I really stayed in school for that aspect of it. And I had also joined the Army National Guard, an infantry unit, my senior year of high school. And it was more about, I wasn't this like, yes, I want to be in the military. Yes, this, kind of gung ho, it was more like, hey, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, right? Just like the commercial.
Yeah.
Go play in the woods 1 week in a month. Sounds great. And they paid for college, even though that's not the path I ultimately went. But a couple years after high school, so I graduated high school in 2000. A couple years after high school, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I know a lot of people have been impacted by that book. And so I picked up that book and thought, like, as I'm reading, I'm just going, yes, 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 this makes sense. Because I was always attracted to business. I was always attracted to finding some level of success, and I just didn't know what that looked like. And I was kind of ingrained, like, oh, you have to go to school, but that just didn't feel like the right path for me. I wasn't attracted to that. And so I'm reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it's really not a how-to book, it's just a mindset around things. And just everything made sense. Just I'm reading word after word, just going yes, yes, yes. So that was really my initial kind of, I guess, indoctrination of like financial freedom and business and real estate. And then shortly after reading that, I got deployed to Iraq in 2003, and I was deployed for 14 months. And so I thought a lot about the stuff that I read in that book. And I was very vocal with my friends saying, I'm going to come back and build this real estate empire. And they kind of, they laughed at me and said, you're an idiot. And why do you think that, like how can you do that? And, my whole thing was like, I don't know how, but I will. Like, I'm going to find a way. So, that book not being a how-to book, I didn't have any answers of how I was going to do it. I just knew that I would. And when I came back, from the Middle East, I really started building my real estate portfolio.
That's fantastic. And I love the background too. I share a very, very similar background as well. I never went to college. I took some classes that I was interested in, but never did the whole thing to get, the piece of paper, so completely understand the mindset, and, Rich Dad, Poor Dad put me on the path that I'm on today too. So
that's great. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So when you came back, how did you find your first deal, and how did you finance your first deal? What was the path that you took to do that?
Yeah, the first deal, it was interesting because, right, I had read that book. I had read a couple other books. So, I come back in 2004 and I start looking at property, and, I didn't buy my first house till 2005, and 2005 was like subprime, anyone can get a loan, but it was also a very competitive market. And so I was competing with cash offers, multiple offers. But I was actually approved. So the first house I ever bought, I got approved for a loan. I didn't have a job and I didn't have income, and they gave me 100% financing type loan. And it was actually an 80-20 loan, but I didn't have to bring any money to the table. And so after I'd been looking for a long time and just getting beat at by other buyers, the realtor that I've been working with, he said, hey, a friend of mine's son bought a home at auction. He's fixing it up. Nobody knows it's for sale yet. And it wasn't a part of town I initially wanted to live in, because I was looking for a home for myself. And I was going to rent out, the extra rooms. Now you hear everyone talk about house hacking, and I didn't know the term house hacking. I just knew that just made good financial sense, right? You rent 2 of the 3 rooms out, you live for less than you can live anywhere else.
Yep.
So ultimately I'm standing in this house going, oh my gosh, nobody else knows it's for sale. And it's a decent house. And the seller's going to, sell it to me at a price less than what I know, which later I found out the house across the street sold for significantly more. And so I'm standing in this thing going, all my competition's gone. Like, nobody knows it's for sale except for me. So I bought that first house, no money down, rented out 2 of the rooms. 2006, very similarly, I started telling people, like, hey, I'm looking for houses. I'm going to invest in real estate. I mean, I owned 1 home, decided in my mind that I was an investor, went and made business cards, told everybody that I'm an investor. And I found my next deal because it was an off-market deal. I told the guy at the gym what I was doing, and he said, oh, my friend's dad's selling a house in that area. And that thing appraised out $40,000 above what I got in contract for.
Yeah.
Only because I opened my mouth and said, hey, I'm an investor. I'm looking for property. And so first 2 deals, no money down. Third deal was a 5% down deal. So 2005, 2006, 2007, it was pretty easy to get a loan. And I'm learning as I go. I'm reading books, and I'm thinking this is easier than the books. Like, I just show up once a year at the bank and they're going to give me a loan. Yeah. And that really came to a halt in 2008. So, also in 2006, I opened up a small nutrition store inside of a gym. By 2008, the store wasn't making any money. And my first son was born in 2008, and I ended up shutting that store down. And I'm going, well, gosh, what do I do? Like, and so I went back to the bank and I'm going to buy another house. And that's when the bank said, no, things have changed completely. You
Yeah.
actually have to have money. You have to have an income. You have to have a down payment. And I was so spoiled with, these no and low money down deals the banks were giving me. Ultimately I had to find another way. Like I didn't have 30% to put down on investment property. And so I just had the decision, like, what do I do? So I ended up working a bunch of odd and end jobs, eventually, landed a entry level minimum wage job. And a few months into that, I had to decide, like, if I was going to get serious in real estate, or just work this job that I didn't enjoy for who knows how long. And so that's when I was really set and determined to replace that income. And because it was a low paying job, that seemed very obtainable.
Mm-hmm.
And that year I did my first seller financing deal. It replaced my income at that job almost to the dollar. And essentially I never worked a job. I never worked a job again. And I also have never traditionally financed a property since that first seller financing deal either. And that was 2009.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So you always use seller financing at this point? Is that
seller? Yeah. So seller financing. So what I found is, because the bank told me, hey, you have to, I go into the bank and they tell me what the terms are. They said, here's the down payment. Here's the interest rate. Here's how you need to qualify.
Yeah.
They said, go get it. They told me, go get a job, get a down payment. And I'm looking at the jobs I qualify for. I'm not going to, even if I live very frugally, like I just save up 30% and then do that once every, 5 years, 10 years. Like that's not attractive. And so I had briefly read about seller financing. And so I just got on Craigslist every single night and was typing in words like owner financing, seller financing, owner terms, and, would have conversations. I would make calls. I was driving looking for properties, but ultimately I found these two duplexes side by side where the seller was willing to carry financing. And I walked away from that deal, excited, feeling like, wow, I just put together a really good deal. But the seller was also thanking me. And I did this a couple more times with no money down. And I realized that these sellers, there's a huge advantage to them. Like I'm thinking as a buyer, wow, what an advantage. I got to make up these terms. Whatever terms the seller and I agree on, we can put on paper and it works. But the sellers were also really happy because these particular sellers, they didn't want to be cashed out. They didn't want to pay a huge capital gain. They wanted income. They wanted that new level of passivity, being hands off. So they're thanking me for buying their house while I'm thanking them for, also buying it from them. And 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, it was all no money down and a couple low money down seller finance deals. And that's really how I started. And it was all small multifamily. That's really how I started building up my portfolio. Since then I've done some private money, some hard money, but really my most recent deal, seller financing. That's always my first go-to every time.
So it's still working today. You're still using that today, and
absolutely
still working out. So what are some of the challenges when you actually? I guess. Are you still using Craigslist, or what are some of the ways that you're using to be able to find these owner financed opportunities? I guess start there.
Yeah, I'd say the best seller financing deals, early on it was Craigslist. And I still think you can find deals on there, right? Because you get the sellers that don't want to put a sign in the yard. They don't want to hire an agent. And sometimes people laugh about Craigslist, but I have people reach out all the time and said, hey, I went on there and I found a deal. I found I found a property. So yeah, I still think that's an opportunity, but a lot of it's just networking. And I don't mean like advertising or sending out a million mailers, but just genuine networking of telling people what you're looking for. Because ultimately the best deals when I look back are when I'm face to face with a seller, because it's so less transactional. It's not me having an agent put it on paper who presents it to their agent who probably knows very little to nothing about seller financing, who then presents it to a seller who I have no idea if they even want to carry or in a position to carry. And so really it's finding those sellers, and a lot of it's just through conversation. And those, again, going back from those first couple deals to the most recent, it's just letting people know what you're looking for, and then having enough conversations around, are they in a position to carry financing? Because every seller who's carried financing for me, they already knew what seller financing was. They already understood the advantages, and they wanted to carry financing. So, I used to get asked a lot, like, how do you convince or talk a seller into carrying financing? And I realized I wasn't sharing that enough on podcasts or when I speak, is these are all sellers. Not saying that you couldn't talk a seller into or explain to a seller what it was. When I reflected back, I had never had to do that. And I thought that's way more of an uphill battle than if I can just find sellers that already know and want to do it. Then it's just a conversation of, hey, what terms are you interested in? What terms will work?
And so when you're going through and negotiating these terms, where do you start at? I mean, is it basically asking them what do they want? And, I guess maybe how do I know that this is a good owner financing term package, or am I getting screwed with this owner financing package?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I do start it off that casual. Hey, what kind of terms would work for you? Or what kind of terms are you interested in? Because what I found is most times sellers are stuck on one aspect of it. It's the purchase price, right? Or it's the down payment that they either need or want for a specific reason. Maybe they're trying to pay something off, or they're trying to go somewhere or buy something, or it's the interest rate. Whatever reason, sellers will get a specific interest rate in their head. But it's rare that I find a seller where it's all three things. And so, early on, I had to find sellers that didn't care about a down payment because I didn't have a down payment. Now it is. I ask, hey, what kind of terms are you interested in? And a lot of the times they throw out something that's really reasonable. I mean, every once in a while I get someone that wants a crazy high price, a high interest rate, and a large down payment, and you start running the basic analyzing of the deal, and this doesn't make sense, And I've said that to sellers in a very nice way, like, hey, I'm looking like this doesn't even pencil. It does for them. It's great for them.
Right.
But in most cases, the sellers are reasonable because for them, it's a new level of passivity where a lot of times in most cases, they're men and women in their 60s and 70s who've self-managed, great people. They're just burnt out. They're tired. They've been landlord and, property manager and maintenance, repair person. And they usually have another job or another business they're running. And so they know that even though they've built some level of wealth and some cash flow on this property, they're just ready to have that hands-off kind of real mailbox money and be the bank. And so for a lot of these sellers, they're okay, taking a little bit of a hit on price or down payment or whatever it might be to take away that headache. Because a lot of times these properties are poorly managed, under rented, some deferred maintenance, and they're looking at it as, gosh, I really don't want to spend the time and energy or money to fix it up. I really don't want to deal with having to screen more tenants or a bad tenant. So as a buyer, there's all that opportunity of the upside. And most of these sellers are okay with that. I mean, I've never walked away from a deal feeling like I've won and they've lost. It's always been this win-win. You're solving a problem, whether that be a bad tenant, or they don't want to deal with the maintenance, or they're just ready to move on.
Got it. And what types of mistakes have you made before in the past when you've been looking at owner financing as an option to be able to acquire a property? Are there any things to watch out for, would you say?
Early on, I went in with, I had a very high risk tolerance. I had nothing to lose. I felt like I had nothing to lose, and I do think, going in with no money, because sometimes I get asked like, well, how much reserves did you have? I didn't have any reserves starting off. Like I had none, but I was also going in with no money. So like not doing those deals to me was way riskier than doing the deals and worried about all the what ifs that could happen. Because there were things that, happened throughout the years. I was just forced to figure it out. I owned the property, right? And so it's, I would get bad tenants occasionally. I used to self-manage when I first started, and you'd get those kind of, oh shit moments, but that's just part of the game. And so, I think, a mistake a lot of people make is just not jumping in. I went in with, I have nothing to lose. The worst case scenario, like what happens? The property goes vacant or catches on fire. I'm going to have an insurance policy. I don't know. The worst case scenario didn't outweigh the risk of not doing the deal. Early on, maybe screening tenants better. I've gone through several property management companies. And now I have some property managers that's phenomenal. But yeah, there were some different things throughout that learning process and growing process, where I could have probably saved or not lost money just having better conversations with property management and such. But I also really I want to really keep my focus on the big picture, not bogged down on all the little things. And that's also part of why I've chose not to self-manage. It becomes it creates a job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you touched on the big picture. What is the big picture for you?
For me, it's about my time. For me, it's time freedom. And,
Mhm.
that was a process. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad at 19 years old, and I was like, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be, and, and there was a lot of reflection and just of realizing, like, what does that mean to me? Like, why do I want that? Why is that so important to me? Like, why do I want this financial freedom so bad? And really it came down to, I want my time. And I
Mhm.
realized I don't want a job. I don't want someone telling me what to do. I want to be able to do, whatever I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And the real estate, the investing, the financial freedom was how I was going to do that. And
Mhm.
so, for me, I want to be able to go, like, right before this podcast, me and my wife went and worked out.
Mhm.
We get to hang out with the kids. We don't miss their events, and like, that's important to me, to be able to jump on a podcast in the middle of the day. Like,
Absolutely.
those are things. So it's the real estate allows me to do all these things in my life outside of my business that are important to me. But that took some time of really realizing, like, why do I want that? And so when I go into making any kind of decision, I think about, how does this affect these other areas of my life? And so
Mhm.
that was a real big decision, and why I chose not to keep self-managing or to start a property management company. I've never had employees. I don't want employees. It's I think a natural step to build a property management company or to start syndicating. I chose not to do that because it didn't align with my other goals and intentions in life.
Got it. Got it. So that's interesting. So you actually, can you talk a little bit about how you found a good property manager? Because obviously that's one of the keys to success, is having, a good one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've been on the back end of that, or the other end of that as well. And sounds like you have. What did you do to finally find the one that you're using today? What were you looking
Trial and error.
for? Yeah.
Trial and error. I mean, I wish I had a great answer, because it's, there's so many management companies out there. I would say most of them aren't great, but a good, even the ones that have good reviews, and I think
Mhm.
I do think that property management is a tough business, right? It's one of the most thankless jobs. I mean, they're dealing with owners, they're dealing with tenants, they're
Mhm.
dealing with their own employees, they're, the maintenance folks, whoever. I mean, it's just a lot of people involved that they're trying to keep happy. And so, I think it's challenging. So there was another investor in town that had a property management company, and he said, "Hey, let me manage one and start there." And so that was a learning process.
Mhm.
I wasn't a great property manager, so I didn't enjoy it. And that was the other big reason. Like, I love, you're asking about big picture. I love putting deals together. I
Yeah.
love analyzing deals. I love meeting, potential sellers and talking to them. It feels very light to me. It feels very easy. It's not work. Property management, I mean, 1 hour and it feels like work. I don't enjoy it. And so, I think it's hard to really know if property management's a good fit until you experience it, because there was a
Mhm.
lot of good, a lot of not good, and I just had to go through a few companies to really realize. And some companies were good in one area and not in the other. And so I wish I had a better answer than trial and
Yeah.
error, but
Yeah. No,
um,
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I completely agree. I wish there was a way to be able to weed people out, weed out the bad ones a little bit easier. But yeah, that is always difficult. When you look at these properties and you evaluate the properties, are you using any type of a calculator? That is this a calculator that you've designed yourself, or um, so I guess just a little bit of insight there. And then um, with the way that you're sourcing these deals, how many deals do you need to look at and follow up with to get to one that you actually end up purchasing? Do you ever look at it that way?
yeah. So as far as analyzing the deals themselves, early on, I knew nothing about cap rate. I didn't know, people were throwing around all these fancy analyzing terms. Early on, it was, and even to this day, it's about cash flow first.
Hmm.
Cash flow first. So the way I looked at it with those first deals, when banks were giving me 100%, easy money, right? There's nothing
Hmm.
to lose. It's cash flow positive, infinite return. Seller financing, same thing. No money down. If I was cash flow positive, I mean, that very first seller financing deal, when I'm looking at the numbers of those 4 units, the 2 duplexes, I'm looking at this going, this cash flows, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Like, and I think people tend to overcomplicate it, right? Like, here's the income coming in, here's the expenses. Now the expenses can change, but I saw the last 2 years of what the expenses have been, so I have a very good idea. I mean, I understand something could go wrong, it could cost more, or maybe something costs less because I, create some better systems or whatnot. But ultimately, if I was going in with no money, any cash flow, that's how I looked at it. Any cash flow was positive. And again, going back to all the what ifs that could happen, it still, didn't outweigh the risk of not doing the deal. So initially it was cash flow positive, no money down. Absolutely. Now, yeah, I'm going to look at, on larger deals. And as I've gone forward, it's, if I'm bringing money to the table, I want a large cash on cash return. Like, what is my return on my money? And obviously going into multifamily, there's going to be more costs associated, but also more income. But I still think people tend to overcomplicate it. You look at money coming in, expenses going out, and even with cash on cash return, cap rate, all these things, ultimately it comes down to, are you happy with the deal at the end of the day with the amount of money you've put into it, or with whatever the terms are? Does that work for you? Because people have different needs, and certain properties also can provide a certain need depending on the person. So it's, sometimes I get asked, like, well, what's a good cash on cash return? I don't think it really matters. It's more about, like, what are your financial goals? What's your investment philosophy? And does this deal align with that? That being said, I really focus on cash flow first. I don't, even if it's a poorly managed, under rented property where there is a lot of upside, because I will buy properties that have a huge appreciation play, but I want them to cash flow first, because that's, I can go back and look what the property's been doing. And that's what really kept me safe, in the last downturn, was cash flow first. Yeah. Now, a lot of wealth has been built through the appreciation. I just never banked on that. I've never relied on the appreciation for the deal to work.
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. And how large of a radius are you investing in? Or do you stick pretty close to home, or do you go outside of that?
Yeah. So most of the stuff I've got 175. I'm working on a couple deals right now, but 175 units right now. Most of them are, in my backyard, 15 minutes away or so. But I have two mobile home parks. One's like 30 minutes south, and another one's an hour south, and I have another apartment an hour south of where I am. So
interesting.
And I go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe you're going to ask this, I never intended to invest here. Like, my market isn't necessarily, I would go, oh, Eugene, Oregon is, a great place to invest because X, X, and X, right? And there's different indicators in markets, but I know this market, and I know this market really well. I know the sub-market. And so I feel like I can make really quick decisions, and I can analyze the deal quick, because I know not only the market, but the sub-markets. Or anywhere else in the country, I don't know. So on paper, a certain area may look really good, but I'm not the one that knows, like, okay, across the street, no one wants to live there, or rents are way less once you get past this particular area. So knowing this area and then being able to network within this area, I'm able to find off-market deals and able to make quick decisions. And I think it's important. You either have to have market knowledge or have a team of people that you trust in that market that has market knowledge. Yeah. So kind of just organically started growing in this area.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. So what would you say is next for you? What are some of the next goals that you're looking to achieve? Obviously, you're looking at a couple of deals, but what's up beyond that even?
Yeah, specific to real estate. Yeah, I'm looking to grow my portfolio, and I've put a lot of thought, like, how do I want to do that? Because I've chosen not to syndicate. I don't want to syndicate for a variety of reasons. And so going forward, I will still do deals on my own, but I'm looking for some strategic partnerships. So, what does someone, does the partner bring something to the table that I don't have? Maybe it's a large rehab project, and they have a, construction management background of some sort, or they bring in a skill set that I don't have. Because again, I enjoy putting the deals together. I enjoy finding the deals, talking with the sellers, negotiating the deal. So that's really, moving forward. I'm actually looking at less deals, in the sense of I'm really not looking at the small stuff. I'm not looking at single family. I'm not looking at small multifamily anymore. I'm really looking at 30 units and above. So I may do less deals,
Mm-hmm.
but just at a larger scale. And at this point, that just makes more sense for me.
No, makes perfect sense. Gabriel, this has been fantastic. I think there's been a lot of nuggets that people are going to be able to take away from this. So certainly appreciate the time and the insights into how you've built your portfolio. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope your listeners have, can gain something from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Many, many thanks.